With the rise of generative AI, it became a lot easier to create content. A lot of content. But is that what we need? What if, instead of focusing on creating even more, we spend more time cleaning up outdated and irrelevant content? That's why we at the Newspring champion World Learning Content Cleanup Day on March 21st. Want to join? Then share your tips and tricks using the hashtag WLCCD. Good luck cleaning!
Now that AI can write scripts for us,
mimic our appearance and our voices,
create video,
with no actual footage being shot.
what really is the point of human beings like me?
or you.
Welcome to The Learning Hack, a podcast about the people and technologies that are creating the future of learning. I'm John Helmer.
Now guess what?
Learning is cool. Learning is cool. Learning is cool. I'm learning.
Learning is fun.
Knowledge is power. Knowledge. Education.
A hornet's nest of controversy and public fear has been stirred up by the latest developments in AI. As human beings who quite sensibly don't 100% trust governments and corporations to look after our future welfare, when this latest wave of automation starts to impact job markets in a big way, which will happen, we worry. Worrying is something that humans do, something machines can't do. What are other things that humans do and machines can't that might mean we still have a role, a value, some usefulness in this future world of work? To explore this question, I invited on the show a learning professional who has always seemed to me quite clear-sighted about this fault line between human and machine. Kate Fitzgerald, head of FACT. Who is he?
Hack Facts.
Rob Hubbard is founder of LearningAge Solutions, an award-winning provider of digital learning design, development, consultancy and training services in the UK and internationally. LAS is a B Corp with a mission to help organisations realise the full benefits of contemporary learning technologies. Rob is also a keen environmentalist, a judge of the Learning Technologies Awards and chaired the Learning Network for 6 years.
We're at a moment when technological advances are highlighting human potentials and frailties in a way that causes us once again to re-evaluate what it is to be human. That's too big a subject to cover in one podcast episode, but it spurred us in this conversation to touch on evolutionary psychology, some important limitations of the human brain, and what exactly Rob means when he talks about human-centered learning. Rob Hubbard, it's great to have you on the podcast. Welcome to The Learning Hack.
Yeah, hey John, thanks for having me.
Rob, you say that you founded your company LAS in order to take a human-centered approach to skills development, behaviour change and improving people's performance at work. What's that mean in practical terms? And in what ways is it a distinctive and different approach? I'm slightly playing devil's advocate here. I.e., what would a non-human-centered approach to any of those things look like? Because they all surely involve human beings, don't they? So what's different about a human-centered approach?
Yeah, so thinking about being a vendor organisation, which LAS is, most people form businesses to make money, which is fair enough. You know, everybody's got to earn a crust. And the way to make money really efficiently and effectively is to do the same thing again and again and get really good at doing that same thing. So you get economies of scale, you build your craft and that's what you do. Then in learning and development, what that means is any problem that somebody comes to you with, guess what? You've got exactly the solution. It just so happens this thing over here that we've got really, really good at doing, i.e., for example, the e-learning course. And you just do that again and again and again. Now, for me, that is producer-centered learning. And this is how learning has always been, you know, the idea of a lecture, whose preference it is, you know, I'm a lecturer, I know lots about this stuff and I like the sound of my voice. So I want to get up in front of people and I'm just going to tell you about it because that's my preference for imparting what I have to you. So the human-centered thing comes about where you try to understand the problem or opportunity that you're trying to address, the people involved, the context that they're operating within, the culture, the constraints of the project, and ultimately what you're trying to achieve, and designing a solution that achieves what that group of humans need to in the context that they're in, within the constraints of the project at that time and within that culture. So that's the kind of being human-centered bit. So it kind of comes from just being very curious and wanting to properly fix things rather than just put a sticking plaster on it. Another course. We get these opportunities coming in where people want us to redesign a course that they've had for donkey's years, which isn't achieving what they want it to achieve. They think the solution is to add some more pixie dust to it, some of this cool new technology. And very often it's the case that the course, the training program, whatever it was, the learning experience wasn't the right way to solve that problem for those people. They haven't been human-centered. They've produced the thing that's their preference to produce.
I take your point that the industry can be very much of a supply side thing. We got these courses, we got these methodologies, we've got these 4-box matrices that we want to kind of sell to people, so that's the way we come to it. On the other hand, to turn that round on you a bit, people want to know you've got some answers. You're not going to kind of make it up as you go along all the time, that there is something that comes behind this. And I'm leading into another question here, which is, I know you bring evolutionary psychology into your practice. What elements of evolutionary psychology come into skills development, behavior change, would you say? Because that's where there is, there's kind of existing knowledge, practice, research, and so on. How does that work?
Well, just before we get into that, just to pick up on people wanting you to have answers. And yeah, we do absolutely get that all the time. It's like, somebody speaking to you, what do you mean you don't have the solution? I've been talking to you for 20 seconds. People just wanting, like, just give me an answer now. Just give me an answer now. If the answer was that simple, you wouldn't have the problem. It already would have been solved. The world is more complex than it's ever been. Organizations are more complex than they've ever been. People's workloads are higher than I've ever known them in all the years I've been in the industry. And these simple solutions, which are, here's my solution, everybody, here it is. This is the solution that's right for you. I think that's incredibly arrogant. I think it's far better to try and be human-centered and design something which is actually going to shift the dial on that. And you may not get it right first time, 100%, but you might get it 60% right. And then if you can identify that and evaluate that and observe what could make it better, then you can iterate and improve that. This all comes back, is this sort of curious problem-solving mindset that I have from my background as being an engineer. But to pick up on the kind of evolutionary psychology side of things, this is the idea that the brain has evolved the same way that our bodies have over millions of years. So, the kinds of things that we draw upon are attention. What do we humans pay attention to? So psychologists talk about the 4 Fs. So fight or flight, which are kind of two sides of the same coin. There's some kind of physical threat to us. We either need to respond aggressively to that, or we need to run away. Food, so what's going to give us sustenance, to give us nutrition so that we're strong, so that we can survive. And the 4th F is politely fornication. You can probably guess what the actual other F is used for. But yeah, things that relate to basically procreating, having offspring, and furthering our genes. So our brains pay automatic attention to stimuli in those 4 areas. And you can think of this, think of any adverts that stick in your mind and experiences that stick in your mind. They're usually hitting one of those 4 areas. Now, unfortunately for us in corporate learning, that means most corporate learning, if not all corporate learning, to the brain is dull. It's boring. It's really difficult to pay attention to these things. So we need to find other ways that we can do that. Now, for better or worse, our species is at the top of the pyramid. Basically, we are the kind of alpha predator on the planet, and we've not done that because we're the biggest or the fastest. We don't have the sharpest teeth. We don't have big claws. We've done that because we can collaborate with others en masse, which means that the sum of a group of us together is more than the parts alone. So as part of that, we are highly tuned to kind of pick up on the emotions of others. If you've ever walked into a room and felt there's a weird atmosphere in here, or it feels slightly charged or a bit kind of on edge. We can pick up on things subconsciously before we kind of consciously realize those. We have our antennas open. We're designed for connecting to other human beings. And one of the ways that we do that is through emotive experiences. So yeah, making things more emotive, using techniques like storytelling, making learning more social. These are all techniques we can use. I mean, this for me is the great failure of the traditional e-learning market. This idea of learning management system plus e-learning module, and that is all that thou shalt be. And that is an incredibly lonely, solitary learning experience that removes all of that human connection. And you're trying to teach people stuff that doesn't meet any of those four, the 4 Fs, the things that we pay automatic attention to. So people, but it's been sold, as I said at the start, for the ease of production. This is the solution that's easiest for people to produce. They've got the author tools, they've got the processes. So it's been shoved down people's throats for decades. But for me, there's a very small number of problems or opportunities that a traditional e-learning module solves or meets. There are many other different tools that we can and should have in our toolbox as L&D professionals to deploy as needed. Some of them are learning tools, some are communication, other around process and ways of working, others are kind of looking at the technologies that people have. So it all kind of fits together there.
Talking there about the interface between, humans and machines, which, obviously this has become progressively in a kind of boiling frog way more and more about what the job is about, isn't it? And it seems we're at a moment where the human limits of human skills and cognitive ability are being questioned, or at least they're being thrown into relief in relation to what looks like new and powerful AI technologies, uniquely new and powerful, it seems. So how are these questions impacting on our view of humanness? We can talk about attention, we can talk about memory, we can talk about emotion. It just seems to me the more we think about how we work alongside AI, the more the differences come up, and these things such as attention and care and emotion become big questions. As in, are they always useful to us? Do they hold us back, or how do we fit together with the machines?
Depends if you view our part as a small cog in the machine, just there to do our part, or as kind of more than that. Really, I mean, I think it's interesting things that I'm observing, like music, for example. The cost of music, streamed music, to all intents and purposes, is basically zero. You can get it off the internet, off streaming services. But if you want to go and see music live and have an experience which is never to be repeated socially with a whole group of people, you pay hundreds of pounds for the privilege of doing that. It's a really kind of, it's an amazing experience, and you get so much more than just listening to the music. You can digitally, you can go and hear that piece of music played perfectly every time. You could watch a video even of those people performing it, even at a live concert. You could watch a video of that with headphones on. You get a certain level of immersion there. But what you won't get is that one-of-a-kind experience with a whole load of other human beings. And for me, what you're paying for there is you're paying for imperfection. And I think that's what we'll come to value more. To be human is to be imperfect. Digital is the way that we can get perfection. Things can be made incredibly perfect using various digital tools and emerging technologies. And there's a place for that. And the place for that is the mass market, low cost, out to everybody. And there's value and there's use in that. But I think we'll value more those imperfections that come from a real human being, it'd be like antiques, for example. An awful lot around the value of an antique is its provenance. It's where it came from. It's the story that piece tells you. It's who created that and when and why they did it and the skills they needed and where they were in their life at the point they did that. The same with great pieces of art as well. And I think for anything that we create, that provenance is going to be, actually, I'll take that back. Not anything we create. Some of the things that we create, that provenance is going to be valued even more when AI and computer-generated perfection is available for anybody. That one of a kind. I'm going to see the band The Smile at the start of next month. It's Tom York and Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead, one of the best drummers I think that's around at the moment. playing with an orchestra. I mean, that is just going to be absolutely mind blowing. I can watch that on YouTube. I can listen to it on Spotify. That is going to be a million times more impactful experience on me personally because I'm there sharing it with other humans.
But
So
is that just about imperfection? I mean, if something's out of tune, it doesn't sound very good. I mean, you don't necessarily want music to be perfect because, perfect is the enemy of the good and all the rest of it. Isn't it more kind of about connection, authenticity, the kind of communal sense you get at a concert of experiencing emotions along with a lot of other people who are having very similar emotions, and that whole kind of vibrating sensory experience of a concert. It's got to be about more than imperfection.
It is about more than imperfection. You are right, but I wouldn't kind of devalue the imperfection or think that it's necessarily a bad thing. If you went along to a concert and they were playing very badly out of tune, fair enough. What you're looking for is different interpretations, different kind of emphases on different parts of the music. I've started playing at jam sessions now. So I was a drummer for many years when I was younger. I was in lots of bands, and that was a really big part of my life. But then with the business, with young kids, life was too busy to be able to do that. I've started going to these jam sessions. A load of middle-aged musicians get together and we just make stuff up, and there's loads of imperfections and bits that sound a bit weird and cranky and bits where people are out of tune. But then there'll also be bits where we all come together and play something that just sounds pretty bloody amazing, frankly. And those imperfections and the journey of getting to that is all part of the experience. We're not playing other people's music. We're not going along and playing cover versions, for example, other people's tracks. We're making it up as we go along. I mean, I think that's a really good metaphor for working these days. We all have skills and abilities, and then we come together in these teams and we work on these projects or work for these organizations. And you're improvising. You had a podcast on this.
Yeah, so you're making me think of a last episode with Belina Raffi talking about the skills of improvisation, and that's very interesting, I think. And we have potentially have a guest coming on to a couple of guests coming on to talk about uncertainty as well as being an important thing. So to kind of bring it back to evolutionary psychology and just chuck another ology in, neuroscience. We're talking about attention, particularly. We've come to learn a lot about the way that human attention functions for good and ill. There was some interesting stuff from Hannah Critchlow I heard on a podcast of people who like numbers. The human brain is made up of 86 billion nerve cells joined together by 86 trillion connections. Information is constantly coming in. So, you walk the street or you're at a concert listening to music. It's thought that 11 billion bytes of data per second is reaching our senses every single second. But we're only consciously aware of something in the region of 30 to 40 bytes of data per second. I mean, this is kind of reducing it to numbers, but that kind of contrast, 11 billion bytes coming in, only conscious of 30 to 40 bytes. Our attention is incredibly selective, isn't it?
Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah, and John Vervaeke, can I pronounce his name, says that's our superpower, that selectivity, but it also tricks us all the time because every time we, our ability to kind of focus and ignore large amounts of what's going on around us is our power to being focused. Focus is something you must deal with a lot as a trainer, trying to get people to be focused. But at the same time, it kind of does open us up to self-delusion in that we ignore stuff all the time. And often not till it's too late, we realize we've been ignoring terrible things going on around us, on the news or whatever, and just not being conscious of that. So that kind of two-edged sword of attention is something that is uniquely human and machines don't have. To link that into what you were just saying, I think what we're doing when we're improvising is playing with that kind of muscle of attention, because you have to listen very carefully to what other people are doing and respond to it. It's a way of kind of broadening us out to improvise. I mean, does any of that resonate?
I mean, there are some humans that can't do that filtering. People who are on the autism spectrum, this is one of the issues that their brain doesn't kind of filter stuff down. They've just got huge amounts of sensory input coming in all of the time, and it's
or else they imperfectly, by our standards, filter it, because there must be some kind of filtering going on. But the confusion of that is emotionally overwhelming. And
absolutely, very debilitating. So we absolutely have to focus on things. Otherwise, we wouldn't be. It's back to the things that we pay attention to, and there's also the Sadgad's 4 Darwinian drives. To survive, to procreate, to reproduce. The third one is kin selection, so prioritizing protecting people who are part of our kin, part of our family. And the fourth one, which I find very interesting, is kind of altruistic giving, the helping of others, because we operate within a society, and if we help others, then they're more likely to help us. But you can see how we need to, just to survive, we have to hugely prioritize the things that we pay attention to and that we take action upon. The things that we're more likely to pay attention to is things that are unusual, because those could be a threat. That's something that we haven't seen before. We don't understand that. That's something new. Is it a threat, or is it a resource, or what is that? So we kind of pay attention to those. But yeah, the kind of creative idea of opening your attention out to things. I think that there is, we do a load of teaching around creativity, and the process that I use is the one that John Cleese recommends. And this is where, first of all, you immerse yourself in whatever the thing is that you need to do. So you spend a period of time, hours or a few days or whatever, really focusing on that, and you let ideas come and you kind of capture them as they do. And then you back off for a while and you do something else. And he describes it as just letting your mind gently kind of rest against something, rest against the problem or the opportunity or the task you've got to do. And then you capture ideas as they come, and you give yourself time and space and headspace to do that and revisit to generate those ideas. Now that's not necessarily something that you're doing with other people. So, I think for me, creativity, I can be very creative with a group, but also I can be very creative on my own. I find what works best is combining the two at various stages of the creative process. And also I'm kind of opening myself up to other influences and closing myself down at different times. So if I want to generate ideas for things, usually I like to do that first of all, just with the thoughts that I come up with. Then I like to work with other people. Then I like to look at what other people have done, what other solutions there are out there, so that I'm not kind of piggybacking or jumping on something which solves a problem which isn't quite the one that I'm trying to solve. So it's that kind of diverging and converging kind of approach. But then for that kind of the iterative creative improvement of something, which is where you kind of, you mess with it and focus on it much longer than anybody else would. It's quite good to be a bit kind of closed off from the outside then, and inward looking and inwardly focused. So yeah, I'm not sure that relates to opening filters and letting more information in. I think it's more kind of purposefully directing attention at different things, whether that's kind of very specifically on what you're working on, or things that are a kind of broader sweep outside for inspiration.
The Learning Hack podcast is supported by Learning News, the learning sector's newswire. Rob and his team are good friends of the podcast, and we really value the help and advice we've had from them, and they do a great job. For the very latest news from around the learning sector, for interviews with learning leaders, the latest from learning sector vendors, and features on workplace learning, go to learningnews.com. Does mindfulness or meditation come into your practice at all? Because that is all about kind of attention, isn't it? And looking carefully at what your attention is doing, and perhaps it sounded like what you were talking was very much in the same kind of wheelhouse in terms of step back, resting your attention against it without engaging.
Yeah, I mean, I did meditate for years, and it was so successful that I just stopped doing it. It's one of those stupid things that you this is great, but I do try to just have like quiet time. I mean, I get a lot of joy observing one of our cats. She's very good at just sitting and looking, just looking at stuff, not thinking of anything. Well, maybe she is. Maybe she's hatching like, well, domination plans or whatever. But it's that kind of quiet sitting, not really thinking of anything, not really looking at anything, just kind of sitting there, which I know I'm not kind of purposefully trying to meditate when I'm doing that. But what you are doing is clearing the clutter out of your mind. I mean, we do on one of our programs that we run, we're doing this longitudinal study on people's creativity. So we've had, I think it's like 93 people now have responded to a survey about creativity. Then we analyze the survey results actually live in the session. And one of the questions is about when in the day are at your most creative. And the shape is really interesting. So people are most creative early in the morning. Then creativity dips down basically in your working hours. And then when you're back home at the end of the day and you've finished all of your tasks and the kids have gone to bed and you've had dinner or whatever, people's creativity peaks again. And people have said, wow, that's interesting. You're at your least creative when
you're at work.
And actually, what we think the group thinks it is, it's to do with mental clutter. When you wake up in the morning, you've had a bit of a reset. Your brain isn't full of all those 1,001 things that you need to do and the huge to-do lists and all of that. And ideas will come. That technique I talked about with John Cleese's approach, my best ideas come just as I'm waking up in the morning. If I've really focused on something and working on an idea at the moment, quite often when I'm in the shower, just ideas will just come. My subconscious will just go, and here you go. Yeah, here you go, Rob. You demonstrated to me with your focus for many days and hours that this thing is important. I've been working on this in the background and here's a solution. I go, wow, thanks very much for that, subconscious, or is it my unconscious? I'm never quite sure.
Yeah.
And literally just note it down. And that process has been so successful for me. Yeah, works really well.
Well, isn't that many people have had that experience of kind of working on a problem, thinking about a problem, not getting anywhere. And then just one morning you wake up and it's there.
Yeah.
It's just kind of as if it is presented to you. And well, that's so interesting, the early kind of those early hours on first waking, because of course you haven't been entirely not present. You've been dreaming. You've been involved in this process of dreaming, which, people, it's still slightly mysterious, but it may have something to do with the brain shunting bits of information about from one filing cabinet to another, if you want to be reductive about it.
Yeah.
And you come out of this, as you say, with a fresh mind and a lot less distractions. Can I kind of pull you back to that idea of the compare and contrast job with how machines think that we all have to do now? The value of humanity in the workforce for a long time, as there's been a progressive process of automation throughout history, is that machines have tended to take over the grunt work, the kind of simple and manual tasks.
Mm.
And as this goes on, we kind of, as they take over the lower floors, the humans move up to the upper floors, and okay, the machines are doing all the difficult stuff. We can focus on being creative and using our wonderful powers of thought. Well, now the machines are up there in the top floor with us and are showing that they sometimes are better at judging things and noticing things and so on than we are. How are you, in your practice, how are you dealing with helping people through the readjustment that inevitably causes to, that machine thinking now comes to play a part in running an organization?
Yeah. I mean, although you can achieve perfection with computers, you can always incredibly quickly now achieve absolute rubbish. And the difficulty is the absolute rubbish is increasingly difficult to tell from the stuff which is actually really good, because it looks just as good as the stuff that's really, you can't, it's difficult for people that haven't been doing this for decades or are using the stuff for real to know that actually what it's teaching is a load of dross. I was quite disheartened to see a LinkedIn article from somebody in the industry that I'd hope would know better and that I really quite respect, that was talking about their new product and talking about learning styles. And it's like, okay, you've clearly not written that. So either that's a machine or somebody junior has written it and it's just kind of gone out without you thinking about it. And to the uninitiated, they would see nothing wrong in that article at all. That's kind of, reinforcing these myths. So, I think one of the roles of the human is to be to learn your craft so that you can be discerning, so that you can spot when something is very convincing looking rubbish, basically, and be able to identify when actually that's only 60% good enough. And in this instance, we need 90% good enough. And, we've developed the skills and expertise to move the dial by that 30%. Now, the real challenge is that the way that you learn that craft is doing your time in the trenches, working your way up, doing the basics, doing all of that kind of mental grind work. Now, if those stepping stones to achieving that mastery have been automated and removed by technology, how do you get there?
Yes.
That's the really challenging thing, that you've got these kind of career pathways that existed before, and the way of learning your craft. I mean, just to go back to music again, if you look back on any musician or any band that have been successful, every single one in their origin story have something where they just played 3 gigs a day for like 9 months or a year or whatever to learn their craft and get really, really fantastic at it. Now with the lack of music venues, and there isn't really a business model in music now, it's so difficult for people to make the money. There isn't that way to kind of learn your craft and get to those, the levels of the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, and, to learn your craft to that extent. And I think we're going to see that in a whole load of different, fields of undertaking, different jobs, different roles. And that is...
Yes, it's a worry in law, isn't it? Because there is this thing that one of the things that people do when they're learning their chops in law is that they have to go through do a lot of grunt work, going through a lot of old case law, and prepare a brief for a barrister or whatever, based on ploughing through all this stuff. And now it seems that AI can do that for them, and there is a kind of worry that people won't have gone through that stuff. They won't have that kind of back memory or that kind of muscle memory of habit, if you like, to use a contentious term, of having waded through all that stuff in the background of the way that they make judgments. So there is a step that gets missed. So one can see that in a variety of professions and métiers.
Yeah, consultancy. Now that we've got these enterprise co-pilot AIs that are coming in, that will be private to the enterprise data, that know all of your products and all of your services, and can look outside at your competitors and know specifically the stuff that you as an individual have been working on, the documents you write, the emails that you send, the transcripts of the Zoom calls that you're in, all of this stuff. Like, there's a whole load of like mid to low level consultant tasks that just the co-pilot's going to be able to do. I think there's still going to be a need for expert consultants, probably more around human interaction, where you're doing things with other humans in real time. And certainly to provide the human in the loop, to provide that oversight of the things that the machines are doing. But, that's a place where, how do you go from being someone that...
How do the experts get to hone their expertise?
How do you jump that gap? That's
interesting. I think there's kind of two ways of looking at it, I think, which is, one is that one thing I'm always aware of with technology is the more you get to work with it, the more expert you get at using a particular tool, the more you know what its downsides are and where it's going to kind of let you down. And I noticed this with kind of coders and techies of various sorts, musicians about their instruments. It's your awareness of the kind of shortcomings of technology which allow you to use it effectively. So as we start to work with ChatGPT and generative AI and so on as an everyday co-pilot type of thing, we're starting to get that sense of where it lets you down. I use it a lot. I think I mentioned before we start to turn the tape on that I've had an experience recently where I realized ChatGPT was gaslighting me, giving me a load of stuff that was, completely wrong. Having in the first iteration of the dialogue given me completely reliable, good information. It will suddenly turn on sixpence. Now that I know it'll do that, that builds up your hoard of experience about how to use the tool. So one way of looking at this is that we learn how to use the tools, we learn what their shortcomings are, and that kind of safeguards us. We're still in control, in a sense. A big anxiety is like the one with self-driving cars, is that the self-driving, the autonomous vehicle makes all the decisions, but the humans have to be able to step in to evade an accident. Well, we know that doesn't quite work, because if you're not involved in the process of driving the thing, you're relaxed, you're lying back, you're reading a book, suddenly the car veers towards running somebody over. In a split second, you're not in the kind of active mode of control to be able to head that off. And I think that's where a lot of the worries come with that. Where would you fall on?
Yeah, your example of being gaslighted by ChatGPT, you were fortunate in that you had the experience and expertise to recognize when it started doing that. But for people that are less experienced, they're not going to know when that happens. So you're going to get stuff put out very convincingly that looks, this is one of my issues with the fetishization of data. Everybody's going nuts for data. This is our new roles in humanity. We're data cows. That's what we exist to do. Generate data for other people to use. Apparently it's for our own good, that we track literally every step, every heartbeat, every exercise that we do, brushing our teeth, sleep, all of this data. Where does it go? Well, it's used to sell stuff to us. We've looked at this, in our projects, we undertake user research. So we have traditionally manually analysed that data, had a real human looking at that data, looking for patterns in the user research data and surfacing insights that we then base our recommendations and whatever we go on to build based on that. So that's a really good use case potentially to get AI involved, because we could have a much larger data set that we access. We could use AI to analyze that data and to surface insights that we could base design decisions on. But if that data is flawed, so if it's excluded people from the audience that should be in there, maybe it's people with disabilities, maybe it's women, those are two groups that are largely ignored in data sets, then that we could have very clever people asking exactly the right questions of a very clever AI with a huge, great big data set, which will then give us emphatic answers that sound very convincing that are fundamentally wrong because they are biased because of the data set that it's working on. This is my big fear, and why I think that we need the human in the loop, and we do need the people with that expertise like you had with ChatGPT to know, that's bullshit, that is, you're making that up now, and I know not to trust that. But as we discussed just earlier, getting to have that level of expertise now, where those intermediate steps have been removed, how are you gonna get there? You're gonna have lots of inexperienced people using this stuff. Very clever computers always right, spits out these results for you, which sound completely plausible, and you base business decisions on, strategy decisions on, hiring and firing decisions on, all of this stuff, and it's just fundamentally wrong. That's a real challenge.
It's making me think of the postmasters scandal. I mean, this is a very UK based thing, but people in other parts of the world may be aware of this because it is an enormous scandal. It was the overdependence on the Horizon system that the post office had put in. In the initial phase of it, I mean, the later phases of it, the cover up, there's just wickedness and evil involved in that. I don't see how you can really say anything else than that. But the early part of it, there was some genuine overdependence on the technology. People felt the technology couldn't be wrong.
That's right. And I think that's where we're heading again. That is the issue, that we will be our lives. I mean, I was just creating a graphic before this. I've got this. I'd like to get a T-shirt printed up with "Slave to the Algorithm," because that's kind of what we are now. There's going to be so many aspects of our life, many of which are already decided by AI, and this stuff is all in the background. It's all in the back office. We don't know why suddenly we're being turned down for credit for whatever reason, or why we haven't been shortlisted for that job interview. Because it's this black box approach to it, and I think it's really tempting not to have the human in the loop, because to have that rigor, A, you need a really experienced person, and B, it's a lot of work to do that. To be able to do that, it's really tempting just to go, oh, computer says this, computer's really clever, algorithm's really clever, let's go with that. And there are kind of huge societal risks there. I mean, I do kind of despair somewhat of LinkedIn. Because the stuff that you get on there around AI, it's so kind of like, it's at two ends of a scale. One is like, it's going to be amazing. come one, come all. What are your reservations about? Ethics, smethics, this is the brave new world, everybody. Jump right in. Say the people who are selling AI products and services, and then at the other end of the scale, you've got oh my God, it's going to eat my job, your job. It's the end of the world as we know it. I've seen the Matrix. I know how this ends, and of course it's not. It's kind of somewhere in between. And it's for us all to choose and make judgments on where on that scale we end up. Some people will be trying to push it up to one end of the scale where it's, as we said, digital, high volume, low cost, high profit, very little human contact, highly automated, because that makes the maximum amount of money for an organization or for an individual. And at the other end of the scale, you've got the stuff which is much more kind of high touch, human contact, less scalable, and I would argue more human. Basically, there's attractions to them both. I'm not saying either end of the scale is inherently wrong. But I think we need to be careful and purposeful about where we use which approach, and how kind of, experience with GPs now, the doctors, they do an incredibly difficult job, but their job is to be an encyclopedia of everything you could possibly have that's wrong with you, and to remember all of these articles and all of these different, ailments that people have had and all of these different studies. And it's like, wow, first line GP, that's an amazing job for an AI. But actually, if I was going in with something I was genuinely worried about, I want to see a human. I want to see a real human in person in the same room. I want to walk in. I want them to be able to talk to me and see how I'm doing and ask me how I'm doing. And there is a hope there that we can shift some of the burden for the little easy kind of automated stuff and use the technology to do that, but then keep the human there front and center, not just in the loop, front and center for the really important, impactful stuff. But it's just, there's always these pressures of like, make more money, save costs, more efficiency, that tends to push it to the automation end. And I think we need, as a species, we need to be very kind of mature in the way that we approach this stuff and not just run after the money. Yeah, that's what I hope.
So vigilance is needed there, I think you're saying. What other advice would you give to somebody who wants to maximize their usefulness in an organization today, if we're going to put it that way, given the likely impacts, as you see it, of current technology developments on the way we work? I mean, is it we constantly having to be vigilant, listening to experts who know enough about how the stuff doesn't work? What kind of advice do you give?
You've got to use the tools. Not using the tool, it's just not an option. If
you can't just get afraid and back off and say, no, I'm like the people who say, no, I'm not doing social media anymore ever because it's too horrible. And
you can't do that. You have to kind of take it on your terms. I mean, I have this battle with social media. I fundamentally think it's overall a really harmful thing to our society. However, it's a huge means of communication. It's one that I have to engage in, but I kind of try and do it on my terms and try not to get too caught up in it. But yeah, you can't just put your head in the sand and ignore these technologies, because if you do, then you're going to get sideswiped by it. I think you need to approach it in a human-centered way, understand the implications of using it, learn about, as you say, what's it good for and where is it weak, and try and kind of plot your course. Because if you don't, then you're going to get the rug pulled out from underneath you. And the other thing is thinking about people's career and even what they study. We've got, our boys are 15 and 17 now. One's off to university, one will be in a few years. But thinking very carefully about actually what they study, what topics. And I sort of hate that. I hate that they can't just go and say, you know what, I want this particular subject is just the thing that I'm really passionate about, and that's what they do. It has to be a very kind of transactional, like, right, okay, it needs to be something I can get a good job doing. It needs to be a good investment of their money to do it. And it's going to have an effect on the arts, really. It'd be really interesting to see the change over time of the numbers of applicants for different university subjects, and that gives you a bit of a kind of view of where things might be heading. But yeah, you've got to use the tools.
That's happening already. I mean, we do hear reports of this, that kind of like, English literature is going down and so on.
Yeah.
It's having an impact that you're completely right. That very kind of career orientated idea of what education is for is tending to drive certain subjects to be kind of pushed to the margin.
Yeah, and we're yet to find this nirvana where, I'm sure the people that brought the looms in said, no, it'll be fine because we're going to save you all of that dreadful, dangerous, noisy, difficult work. So you can just like hang out and go boating, maybe sip some cocktails or whatever. And with every new bit of technology that comes through, that's how it's sold to us. That's what we're told. When are we going to reach that nirvana?
Yeah, but you're making it sound like that's very kind of, the capitalists come in and they say all this stuff, and this is going to say, make life a lot easier for you. The people who have perpetuated that myth of how machines are going to make us into the Eloi and we'll sit by the riverbank sipping cocktails have tended to be on the progressive side. Oscar Wilde was one of these people, at the turn of the century, saying machines are going to do all the work. And we're just going to kind of swan around in velvet jackets, making great art, And that theme has been repeated again and again. But it does tend to come from the progressive side rather from the capitalists. Capitalists just say, oh, here's some work, here's loads of money. Don't you want to do it?
Yeah. I guess maybe because the progressive side, that's the lifestyle that they yearn towards. And they don't want to be kind of doing the
Guardian reading graduate Ramonas, like you and me.
Yeah, like us. But I think what a time to be alive, honestly. I can remember when the internet appeared, and look at us now. It is kind of mind-boggling, really. I'm a lifelong fan of hard sci-fi, so I don't know if you're familiar with that. So it's not like laser guns and Star Wars and things like that. It's about, it's a way of I think of it as like future philosophy. It's kind of extrapolating from what we've got and thinking, well, what
Give us
if?
a few examples. You talk about what, Ursula Le Guin or
Yeah,
The
well,
Expanse or Foundation.
Yeah, The Expanse is a great one. I'm just rewatching series at the moment, but looking at how we colonized various colonized countries around the world and how we kind of expanded, and then extrapolating that out into space with all of the kind of the kind of political pressures that there are and the resource pressures and all of these things. Really kind of fascinating. So like watching this, our version of reality now, which essentially is like it's like an episode of Black Mirror. It's like this has all been written by Charlie Brooker. He must be wondering what on earth he's going to spend his time doing next. But with all of this stuff that's going on, there's loads of opportunities to make things better. I studied 30 years ago sustainability. I learned about wind farms and wave power and biomass and nuclear and all of this good stuff. And in those 30 years, we've only got more and more solutions, more and more things we can do to make the world better for everybody. They exist, they're there, and that I think is incredibly kind of, that makes me feel optimistic. And now that people are kind of standing up, you've got movements like B Corp, we're a B Corp, there's like how many thousand of us worldwide. A lot of companies that, fair enough, there is a load of greenwashing going on, but there's only so long you can keep just saying the green stuff without doing it before it becomes actually more cost effective to be doing the green sustainable stuff as well, particularly when your customers decide to choose a more kind of low carbon, sustainable product from a different provider than yours. So I kind of see all of these changes coming about. And I do think things are going to get better. I really do. But I think they're going to get worse for a bit first. And I think it's going to be a bumpy old few years. But I think that good sense and good people and good judgment will win out. And it's amazing that we've got the tools that we've got now, that this stuff can be amplified and it can be done. And I think we are beginning to see a shift in the dial on it. So yeah, I'm kind of quietly optimistic. I'm also very cynical of things that are presented to me as like this is the next amazing thing. This is what's going to save us all or whatever. But yeah, quietly optimistic for human nature, I think.
We've spoken there from the employee side of view, as it were, because I asked a question: how should people, what should people be thinking and feeling in order to kind of make them able to function in this situation? From the other side of that question, for people who are working in people functions specifically, if you're kind of in L&D or teaching, training of some kind, or HR, how do you think they should work and plan to maximize their positive impact in this situation for the people on whose behalf they work?
Yeah. So I certainly would not be all about output. Don't be all about the number of training programs that you run or the amount of content you produce, or courses or videos or whatever, because the cost of producing those, not the face-to-face training but the digital assets, is basically tending to zero. So don't be all about that. Be all about the analysis, be all about the value add, be all about understanding what's the problem or opportunity that we're trying to address here. Who are the people involved? How does this impact on them? What are the behaviors that we want them to adopt? What might be the blockers to changing behaviors? The kind of the toolbox that learning and development professionals have available to them has suddenly got loads wider and loads more powerful, but they need to think more like L&D consultants. They need to have that curious problem-solving mindset, because if you're all just about production, guess what? The tools are going to be doing that really quickly. And that's great, because you don't have to spend your time doing that now. You can be genuinely solving the challenges, helping your organization deliver on its strategy and meet its goals, and demonstrating that you're doing that. And that, this is the change that people like, Laura Overton's been talking about for, what is it, probably 20 years now?
Yeah.
And it's needed more now than ever. It really is. And it can feel like a big step for internal L&D teams to take, but you can take smaller steps to get you there. And I think that really is what you have to do. Don't be about the output, be about the problem solving, be about the analysis, and then the output is whatever the output needs to be. And the tools can help you make that output even more quickly than ever before. But make sure, I wrote something on this the other day. If you're doing a large scale learning project, particularly digital learning, the biggest cost to that is the time cost of people going through it. Okay, you might be able to, I saw this awful advert on LinkedIn for a video tool, generative video tool, where a supposed user said, this is just going to be amazing for us. We've got 300 PowerPoint slide decks that nobody looks at. Now I can really quickly create those into 300 videos. It's like,
that nobody looks at.
Don't do that. Why not try and work out why nobody looks at those PowerPoints? Are they out of date or not relevant, or not pitched at the right level, or is the language confusing, or don't they give people why aren't people accessing that? Design a different solution.
Lastly, who and where do you go to for your own knowledge and information and learning? Who do you look up to, and who do you look out for?
Yeah, I tend to look outwards, really. So I love attending conferences and events. I tend to find I get the most from the keynotes. I take tons of notes when I go to these things. I don't reams and reams of digital notes. But I also go along to these events with specific questions in mind that I want a kind of view on or an answer to. And I spend my time when I meet people, I just ask them those questions. So I always come away with a whole load of really interesting stuff. Also, there's just the people that you just sort of bump into and you get chatting about, and can kind of change your mind. So within L&D, much more the kind of conferences and attending those. LinkedIn, not so much. Everybody on LinkedIn is selling something. They're selling their company's products or services, their products or services, or them as an individual.
Or their podcast. Yeah. Sorry, mea culpa.
Or whatever. And that's fine. It's a sales and marketing platform, that's okay. But I find the fact that you have to, everything that you read, you have to go, so who wrote that? And what's their interest in this thing? And then you have to view it through that lens. I find just quite tiring. I mean, it's also, you spend too much time on LinkedIn, it just makes you hyperventilate. It's like all this stuff like AI this, AI that, and oh my God, it's like we all need a kind of just some sort of refuge. We can all come together and like talk about kittens or something, to have a bit of refuge from that. So yeah, not really LinkedIn, but I do go to like the How to Academy talks. Do you know those?
I've heard of them, yeah.
Yeah, so they're kind of like longer form TED talks. They tend to be presentational. They're around about half an hour. Basically, everybody there is selling a new book, but they are kind of literally world leading experts in all kinds of different fields. really interesting. So those are brilliant. Get a lot from those. And then I read books really slowly. I don't read a great deal, but I read kind of like carefully. I try to read a little, think a lot, try to join the dots. That's basically it. Yeah.
What are you reading at the moment?
I'm reading a book by Professor David Nutt on all of the kind of medicinal benefits and the ways that hallucinogenic drugs and what are currently illegal drugs and substances, how powerful they are, and sort of understanding why all of the research on that was shut down by the states in the 60s, largely to do with the Vietnam War and the protests against that. And just all of that, they're now starting to free things up a bit, and they're starting to use these various compounds to treat like long-term people with PTSD that haven't responded to anything else, people with long-term depression, people with substance dependency, and it's absolutely fascinating because that really gets into how the brain works and how these substances basically let you it defrags the brain, and then with guidance from a professional, you can break these harmful cycles of thought. You know, a lot of harm is done to individuals where they get stuck in these cycles of thought, which can be negative self-talk or things about them or their behaviors or whatever. Taking these substances with guidance is a way that you can break these cycles and reprogram them, you know, redefine what those should be. And it's been incredibly helpful to a lot of people. And now they've got, well, I say now, they've had the evidence for years, but now they're starting to free up the ability for people to use these. So, you know, that's all to do with the brain. It's all to do with behavior. And I get an awful lot from reading around our subject and kind of taking things in from there rather than like just going L&D, you know.
Interesting. Microdosing as we speak. Actually, no, I'm not. I have worked with people who are microdosing there. It could be a bit alarming. Thank you very much for that, Rob. I feel we could talk all day, and I hope we'll have a kind of part two at some point, and I hope to bump into you on the conference circuit at some point this year and the next year. Thank you very much for that. It's a really interesting discussion.
Yeah, cheers, John. I enjoyed it. Real pleasure. Thank you.
That's all on the Learning Hack podcast for this time. Many thanks to our guest and to our sponsors.
The Learning Hack is among the top 5% most listened to podcasts globally, according to Listen Notes, we found out. But it depends for its existence solely on sponsorship and your Patreon contributions. If you want us to continue holding these excellent conversations about learning, it's you who said they're excellent, not us. Let's have a chat about your company sponsoring. Or sign up to patreon.com/learninghack. And for a piddlingly small amount of money, get transcripts, text summaries, and early access. Keep us alive. Until next time.
Stay classy, learning people.
Now I finally